My name is Anna Palmer. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of Punchbowl News. Thrilled that you all are here to join us for this pop-up conversation with Senator Raphael Warnock. There is no shortage of things to discuss this morning. A big thank you to Bear for making this conversation possible. Of course, we're going to get to news of the day, but we're also really going to zero in on agriculture, innovation, what's happening with the Farm Bill, and a lot more. So look forward to having that conversation. Afterward, I'm going to be joined on stage for a fireside chat with Jessica Christensen, Head of Sustainability and Business Stewardship at Bayer, and Kyle Bridgeforth, an owner and operating partner at Bridgeforth Farms. As always, you can find Punchbowl News on all social media at Punchbowl News. We encourage you to share this conversation. We want to make sure we amplify it as much as possible. So with that, I'm going to welcome Senator Warnock to the stage. Senator. What a day to be sitting down.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much. So, as always, we start these conversations with some news of the day, and we have no shortage of that. I want to talk government funding in particular. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer changed strategies, is now kind of pushing forward with a 45-day continuing resolution. As part of that, it also includes about $6 billion in Ukraine funding and disaster relief funding. Do you support this strategy?
The most important thing in this moment is that we keep the government open. As I'm talking to ordinary citizens and people in the farming community, the last thing they need is the kind of uncertainty and disruption that this would cause, and it's totally unnecessary. So I think it's important for cooler heads to prevail and for us to find a way to center the people rather than the politics. And I think if we do that, we can move forward in a way that's helpful to the people who sent us here to serve.
Speaking of cooler heads prevailing, in the other chamber you're not a member of, the House, things are getting a little hot, and there's some speculation that McCarthy, the Speaker, could face a motion to vacate if he goes forward with pushing forward with this funding bill that the Senate is looking to pass. Do you think Democrats should help keep McCarthy in the speakership if Republicans go forward with a motion to vacate?
What I'm trying to do is help keep Georgia farmers and Georgia families in a strong position. So the politics are what they are. We are witnessing the kind of brinksmanship that's totally unnecessary. The terms for where we ought to be with this discussion were set a few months ago around the debt ceiling debate, and this revisiting of these circumstances while at the same time leaving people out in the cold is deeply irresponsible. It's very irresponsible, and what I'm focused on is making sure that we do everything we can to protect Georgia families.
Before we get to the topic of agriculture, I want to ask you one other quick question because it's been on the minds of a lot of people around Senator Bob Menendez and his future. Many Democratic senators have called on Senator Menendez to resign following the indictment. Is there further action that you think the Senate could or should take when it comes to Senator Menendez?
Well, we'll see. You know, the facts around this are still coming out. But here's the thing. Those of us who have the privilege really, of representing the people of our state, have a sacred covenant. And they need to know that when we're making decisions, we're centering the concerns of ordinary people and not some other interests, and which is why I've joined my colleagues in saying that he needs to step aside and resign.
All right, let's get to agriculture, the topic of the day. The Senate has struggled to pass an agriculture bill. Do you think an extension should be passed just to help give some certainty to farmers, or how optimistic are you that a larger package can get done?
Well, I'm still holding out hope that we'll get this done. We're not, we're coming right up on the September 30th deadline, but we've been here before. And it's just important. It's extremely important that we get a farm bill done. Georgia's a big ag state, and I'm doing everything I can to push forward bipartisan proposals to get us beyond the impasse. Again, the center of the people rather than the politics. I think when we do that, we can come to reasonable solutions.
assisting farmers is something you've seen a need for in your own home state. Georgia is known for its peaches, as many of us have, I'm sure, taken part in. But recently, 90% of the peach yield was lost. What kind of safety net do you think, or even in this real-life example, is needed for farmers when crops fail?
Well, it's something that I'm very focused on. Farming is a tough business, and the margins are very small to begin with. And often you're at the mercy of the market, climate change, natural disasters. We're seeing more and more of these storms. They're more extreme. They come more often. They're starting earlier. They're lasting longer. So we've got to get real about this and make sure that we do everything to protect our farmers, who for me are an answer to a prayer that many of us pray every day: give us this day our daily bread. And it seems to me the least we can do is to make sure that those who feed our families have their families protected, which is why I'm focused on the kinds of crop insurance and support for those who may find themselves in this situation.
I want to talk about minority farmers. The Farm Bill has some provisions in it that would help minority farmers. How big of an issue is it for them in particular if the Farm Bill, struggles to move forward? As you noted, I mean, we're coming right up against the deadline.
Well, again, farming is a tough business, period, overall. And then there are those who've experienced historic discrimination, which I'm interested in helping. I'm interested in helping veteran farmers, beginning farmers. And when we do that, I think it's a win-win for everybody. One of the other things that I'm very focused on is our 1890 land grant institutions. University of Georgia does incredible work, and I want to continue to support that. But Fort Valley also deserves our support. And I've joined with some of my colleagues, Senator Brown and others, to make sure that we strengthen and uplift our 1890 land grant universities, which participate in research and a whole range of things that support the agricultural sector.
I actually grew up on a farm. I don't know if you knew that about me. I'm from North Dakota. We were speaking backstage about how technology has really changed from 20 some years ago when I was in North Dakota. I want you to talk a little bit about how you see technology helping changing agriculture in your state, because it's pretty astounding the advances that have been made.
Absolutely, and I'm proud of the work that I'm doing in that area. I've actually partnered with Senator Thune.
I mean South Dakota. It's
South
okay.
Dakota.
It's no North Dakota.
It's one of the Dakotas. Right. But he and I have a precision agriculture bill. We've got all this wonderful technology, and what we have is a situation where technologies are being created, obviously, by different companies, and they don't often talk to each other well. Right. So it's like having an iPhone and an Android. I would ask who has iPhones, who has Androids, but I might start a fight here. But we don't even think about it. The thing about it is you never ask when someone's calling you, if they want to call you, do you have an iPhone or an Android? Because they talk to one another. And what we have is with this, some of this technology is that parts don't necessarily relate to one another. So Senator Thune and I put forward a bill to work on that problem. I was recently down at the Iron Horse Farm and got to see up close how farmers are using robotics, using drones, monitoring systems so that you use just the amount of water, the amount of inputs, the amount of fertilizer, which is good for both the ecology and the economy. But we've got to do a lot more research there and do whatever we can at the federal level to advance that work.
One of the things you mentioned, climate change, sustainability, the challenges that we are facing, just as a world. We hear a lot about sustainability in farming and what can be done. What are you hearing from your constituents when it comes to some of the advancements in these areas? Or are there things that make you feel optimistic, maybe about how the agriculture community is taking on sustainability?
Yeah, if you talk to farmers, and in Georgia and in other places, a lot of them are making good use of these conservation programs and sustainable agriculture, which is why I'm focused on it. I'm hearing from them that this is what they want. I've talked to farmers like Tommy Crow, whom I recently met, who's a pecan farmer down in Georgia. He's making great use. The farmer's been in his family about 100 years. But his practices are looking already a lot different than previous generations. And he's focused on using just the amount of water, the amount of fertilizer. And so I'm hopeful that in the Farm Bill, we'll continue to support these programs. My friend Bob Dickey, I hope I'm not getting him in trouble by calling him a friend. He's a Republican legislator in our state house. But Dickey Farms is making good use of these conservation programs, CSP, EQIP. And so these are things that I'm focused on, making sure that they're in the Farm Bill.
Talk about that, because I think it's so amazing to me how precise everything can be to the point of how much water is being used, how people are using it in different ways. But pesticides, when you think about crop protection, it's a whole different ballgame than it was. How do you see the future of those in terms of being used and can also being used for sustainability?
I think that's the future. And I was in a driverless tractor when I was down at the Iron Horse Farm. It sounds like fun, but it makes a huge difference. And I was just really impressed with the farmers that I talked to down there, the researchers who could show how much, what a huge difference this makes, again, for the margins, the profit margins for farmers. So here's the thing for me. I think sometimes there is this false choice that's put before us between being ecologically sustainable and economically sustainable. And I think already we're seeing the ways in which those things are connected. The federal government, the Farm Bill, we have a particular role we can play in advancing where the future is. And I think it'll help us get beyond some of these divides and some of these debates. I don't think the farmers are interested in our ideology. They want their crops to grow. They want to feed everybody, and they want to be able to pass the farm on to the next generation. And I want to do everything I can to help them to do that.
Talk about, so in the Inflation Reduction Act, that there were some programs that were focused on some of these conservation initiatives, and now some of your fellow lawmakers want to remove the allocations in the Farm Bill. That's something you disagree with. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I don't think it's important that I disagree with it. I think they should talk to farmers in Georgia and in their own state. And many of them are making good use of these conservation programs, but they are greatly oversubscribed. We have a lot more demand than we have supply for these programs, which is why we put the $20 billion there in the Inflation Reduction Act. And we ought to lean in there. Again, it's not just the right thing to do in terms of the ecology. I think it's the smart thing to do economically, is where the future is. And they don't have to take my word for it. Talk to the farmers in their own state.
I want to shift a little bit about kind of to the future, to innovation. Are there tools that you think farmers need when it comes to feeding future populations? When you think about the future of farming, of these kind of passing down farms into the next generation, that you think either Washington can be more helpful on, or that you think people maybe need to hear more about when it comes to the feeding of future populations and the future of farming?
Yeah, I think that's the work. And that's how I think about my project and the work of reauthorizing, again, the Farm Bill, is how do we take care of the current needs, and how do we make sure that we are doing farming in a way that's sustainable. Again, economically sustainable, ecologically sustainable. And I'm really impressed with the ways in which increasingly farmers in Georgia and other places are using crop rotation, reduced tillage, a whole range of sustainable practices, which I think are absolutely essential. And what I want to do is get the policy right to help advance that work.
much do you think, usually the Farm Bill is something you think of as a real bipartisan issue, right? It's something that is more state, to your point of, states that have rural versus urban issues on some of the SNAP programs and others. Do you think that still holds today?
Well, the fault lines are sometimes partisan, often they're regional. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that our farmers in Georgia and throughout our country, that they're able to compete. We're in a global marketplace after all, which is why I've done a lot of work with my colleagues to deal with some of these trade issues. We were able to reduce the trade deficit in India around pecans by 70%. That's work that I did across the aisle. I think that we have to find ways to work together. And I think very often what's set up is a false choice. We can support SNAP programs, and we can support commodities, and we can have a kind of long-term view that ensures that the Georgia ag community is sustainable, resilient, and thrives well into the future.
All right, we're about to get the hook, but I couldn't have you on stage and not ask you a little bit about 2024. So the last question is going to be about Georgia. Obviously, a hotbed of politics there. Recently, a lot's been made about Joe Biden and his age. What are you feeling on the ground in Georgia? What should we all be from Washington looking at what's happening in your state when it comes to the 2024 cycle?
Oh, Georgia's on everybody's mind, and for good reason. A lot of the things that we were able to do in the last Congress, and I think we'll get done in this Congress, is because of Georgia. And so we'll see how this plays out over the next few months. But I'm proud of the work that we've been able to do, and hopefully we can get the Farm Bill over the finish line. I think at the end of the day, people are interested in what you're doing for their families. I mean that when I say that's the covenant that we have with the people who elected us. It is the privilege of my life to represent the people of my state, for them to say, when we think about the family farm, when we think about our children and what we want for them, we're going to entrust that in these rooms you're going to be thinking about our families, that you're not going to be so focused on the next election that you're not thinking about that you're not thinking about the next generation. That's the work that I'm focused on.
All right, we'll leave it there. Senator, thank you so much. We appreciate you joining us this morning. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
We're matching.
I know. Look at it.
Look at that.
All right. We didn't even plan it. All right. Thank you so much, Senator. Now I'd like to welcome Jessica Christensen. She is head of sustainability and business stewardship at Bayer, and Kyle Bridgeforth, owner and operating partner at Bridgeforth Farms, for a fireside chat. Welcome. All right, we got a lot to unpack here on agriculture, what's happening on the ground, what you're seeing from your vantage point, Jessica. So I want to start with you, Jessica. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how Bayer is thinking about modern farming. We heard a lot from the senator about how he's hearing from constituents, kind of the precision farming that can happen now. A lot has changed. Would love for you to talk about what's happening now and kind of go into the future a little bit.
Yeah, and thanks for having me. It's a really good discussion with Senator Warnock. So at Bayer, we're really focused on, we're an innovation company. So we focus in the crop science division on seeds and our biotechnology, crop protection products, biologics, digital tools. The evolution in farming is going fast. I mean, as you said, it looked a lot different 20 years ago in your farm on North Dakota. So what we need to do is really focus on how do we pull products together into systems that are not just sustainable, but evolving to regenerative systems. And so that really will help our farmers, which farming is hard. We have to make things easy and simple. They've got a lot on their plate. So the access to innovation and technology is super critical. And so at Bayer, we not only innovate, but we really think about the full ecosystem around the farmer. So from out-licensing broadly our technologies to make sure they're accessible through various channels to partnering. So we are working with a lot of folks, so an open sourcing innovation model oftentimes. So if somebody's got something, great, let's get it to scale. That's what we have is scale. So access is super important, everything from working with financial institutions for cash liquidity of all size of farmers, all the way down to off-takers. How do we actually generate more revenue for farmers like Kyle who are practicing sustainable production? And so that's a key focus for us as far as access to.
I'm going to ask you one more question, then I'm going to turn to you, Kyle. But can you talk a little bit about the initiative that you have around regenerative agriculture? Sorry, that's a mouthful for me this morning.
Yeah, so, at Bayer, we've been producing more with less for a long time. And that really is sustainability in our mind. So we tackle in our own operations, because we're a big company, we're a big multinational company, we have a responsibility to reduce our greenhouse gas footprint, to be responsible with water, to have a social impact on the livelihoods of the underserved and underdeveloped communities. In crop science, because we have three divisions. We have three divisions at Bayer, so we're uniquely focused on our mission of health for all and hunger for none. So we have pharmaceuticals, consumer, and our crop science division. Crop science even has more of an opportunity, you guys, to actually help the planetary crisis that we're in because of farmers. So yes, farming has an impact on the environment, but it also can be the biggest lever to solve some of these crises that we're facing. So regenerative is not only producing more with less, it's producing more while restoring more. So that's really, you pull all the products together that Bayer and others are innovating in this space into true systems with practices that actually restore the environment. So the crop rotations, no-till, limited-till, cover cropping, digital precision agriculture. So we're really focused on how do we build those solutions and actually have the tracking and the data pieces too to enable farmers to actually be more productive and profitable. So regenerative ag to us is about outcomes, soil health, water, greenhouse gas, but it has to be productive and profitable or farmers won't adopt it. And then we won't get to scale. Bayer alone could reach around 400 million acres just in our seed footprint globally. And so that's how you get to scale to really impact the climate positively.
It's super interesting. My parents actually were one of the original no-till farmers. They changed it, but you still have to have the profitability. You have to be able to make it at scale. I want to bring you in, Kyle, because you have that kind of real-life experience here. You are a fifth-generation row crop agribusiness, and you run it out of Tanner, Alabama. Talk about how you've seen just in your own kind of time farming the approach to technology and how it's making a big impact.
Sure, and it's great to be here, and great to hear such a focus on regenerative ag, the focus of changing in agriculture, and it's changing quickly. I can look back from when I started my career 12 years ago, and where it is today. We're in the midst of a digital revolution. 12 years ago, recording the data, capturing it from the field, there was more of a focus on yield and productivity. Now there's a big focus on capturing how you're growing it, how are you harvesting it, carbon sequestration, all the metrics and layers of data that come every time you make a trip over the field. It's really important to capture it for your downstream partners, for the value of the crop that you're selling, so on and so forth. So we've seen a huge focus not just on how much you can produce per acre, but how it's produced, where it's going, and certainly a big focus on the environment itself. In addition to that, we're seeing different types of growers come into the space. So there's some that have a big focus on ecology, a big focus on soil health. They're selling into markets that care about those issues, and they have technology to measure it. So certainly a more digital focus, cloud capturing the data, making data-based decisions it's not just something internally for your organization. It's something the entire supply chain cares about.
So you both mentioned sustainability, climate. That's obviously something that's on all of our minds. Kyle, talk a little bit about what you're seeing the impact farming can have maybe positively on sustainability.
Sure. Farming is, as much as any industry, has the ability to make a large impact, not just for the country as a whole, but the smaller scale growers, large scale growers, all can benefit from sustainable techniques, especially the smaller shareholder farmers. It gives the option to become value add. You can sell into a niche market. You can much more confidently grow crops that are volatile to grow. I mean, farming, as you've heard from Jessica and Senator Warnock, farming is hard. It's very difficult, and it's only increasing in difficulty. It's the most volatile market space. You're dealing with the weather and variables that are impossible to measure and predict, and it's requiring an increasing scale to manage these difficult variables. So it's something that technology is giving you the option to look at historical reference on making decisions, know exactly the amount of inputs you need as far as fertilizer, pesticide usage, water usage, even fuel usage, equipment. Everything now is very exacting in your application in farming. It's not a blanket approach. It's not the same amount of every input, every application. It changes every year. Every time you go over the field, there's a decision-making process for it, which is giving smaller farmers the opportunity to maximize on those acres.
Jess, I want to go back to you on kind of innovation. That's been an underpinning, I think, basically of this entire conversation. So it's. I feel like we've kind of gotten to it, but I wanted to really kind of have you maybe expound a little bit when it comes to what you're seeing in terms of innovation and the progress and what that means for, agribusiness going forward.
Yeah, and it's a great question. So let me give you a real example of some technologies and programs we're launching in the U.S. So our U.S. farmers are some of the most sustainable farmers in the world, and they are also critical for food security and nutrition security, so from row crops to vegetables, right? So let's talk about a system. I talked about the regenerative system a second ago. In the U.S., we have what's called Precision Smart Corn, so it's a short stature corn. It's very different. We have two different lines. One is through traditional breeding, and one is through biotechnology, so it's offering some choice. We also are working on a gene-edited version. So even the seed technology from breeding to trait technology is evolving really rapidly. So lots of flexibility. That technology enables farmers to do split nitrogen applications, to access the field season-long, to do precision agriculture, as Kyle just talked about, versus aerial. We think we might have some better root systems for nutrient and water use efficiency. But then you can use a cover crop called covercress, which we invested in, which is a cash cover crop. So it's a pennycress weed that was gene edited to become an oil seed that can be used in aviation, sustainable aviation fuels or biofuels. And it covers the land. It helps with your soil erosion and soil health. Then you could rotate that with XtendFlex soybeans, our next generation soybean with ultimate weed control, so you can use crop protection products that you need, it enables no-till or limited till. Again, you have a variety of market offsets there that your off-takers you could get into. And then where Kyle's at, he can also rotate with cotton. He's a big cotton producer, right? So it's really about the system. All of that's underpinned with crop protection, biologics, seed growth technology, and digital, very importantly, to be super farmer-centric, to make sure that we're customizing per that location, because every farm's different in with the practices and technologies they need. The off-taker markets, so we're trying to open up new revenue for farmers through some of those sustainably produced commodities. But also we have programs like our carbon business model here in the U.S. and Foreground, which is really a farmer-first platform to connect them to knowledge and how to do this. It's hard. It's hard to make these changes and be profitable. So connecting them there as well as to commodity groups to hopefully get more revenue from the way they produce.
All right, we are quickly running out of time, but I want to do a lightning round here, and I like to always end these conversations because neither of you are Washington-based, but you have the ear of Washington, right? You have staffers, you have advocates, you have people that are lawmakers who will read about this. I'm going to go to you, Kyle, and then I'll give you the last word, Jessica. What do you think Washington needs to know when it comes to agriculture, innovation, clarity maybe in regulations? I'll start with you.
Sure. First, I think I'd like to see a focus on innovation, not just on the agronomics, not just on the equipment, but how quickly the industry is growing for all scale of growers. And in order for a lot of farmers to adopt these new technologies, we need an access to capital. You need first-generation farmers in, you need minority farmers in, you need diverse representation, and there needs to be a suite of financing options and access to capital for all growers, whether it's in the form of low-interest loans from a government or it's in the form of grant funding for a specific program, so some of these precision ag and innovative techniques can be adopted. That's essential for us to move forward.
Great.
Diversity, equity, inclusion is what's going to make the world go, you guys. That's a whole nother session. But so couldn't agree more, Kyle. But also, I think we need fit-for-purpose regulation. Modern innovation is driving regenerative ag. If we don't have modern innovation, we're not going to be able to feed, clothe, and fuel the world while preserving the environment.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Thank you both so much for joining us this morning. Thank you all for joining us in person and on the live stream. And of course, a big thank you to Senator Warnock and his team for joining us this morning, as well as Bear for making this conversation possible. We have a couple of conversations already happening next week, so would love for you all to join us there. You can sign up for those at our events hub at punchbowl.news. Have a great day and stay safe, everybody. Thanks so much.